YouTube. Welcome back to another episode of Common Sense, Logic, and Reason. Today I'm going to talk about a liberal tactic or a common tactic that you'll hear from liberals. And you know, they always have to resort to tactics and tricks and wizardry because very rarely do they have the facts on their side. Very rarely do common sense, logic, and reason fits their narrative. So when you don't have the facts on your side, when you don't have the evidence, you have to resort to other means to try to make your point. Well, one of the common liberal tactics that you often hear is the tactic of absoluteness. What is that? Well, if you make a point, let's say if you talk about race or much more likely, you say words like that, they will hear in their minds all, even though clearly you didn't say that. For instance, if you say something like, children who grow up in single parent households without fathers are much more likely to commit a crime, to go to jail, to commit murder, to be illiterate, to grow up in poverty, to be impoverished themselves, to have children out of wedlock, to perpetuates the problem, and so on and so forth. If you look at all the much more likely that of children who grow up in single parent homes without fathers, it's just staggering. And they will hear all. And one of the common things that I've always run into is whenever I bring forward that point, the fact of children who grow up without single parent households without fathers, is I always get a tendency of having blacks or the people who are opposed to, they'll think of all the blacks that they can think of who grew up in single parent households without fathers, who did well for themselves, or they'll think of blacks who grew up in two parent household who didn't turn out so well, and it will quote out all the people that they can think of who fit that description. I'm saying as if the exception outweighs the rule. You know, because they can't really debate that point. So, you know, you always got to fall back on some type of tactic. And the tactic of absoluteness is one of those common tactics that they will fall back on, excuses, so as not to accept the truth. And again, these are the extremely brainwashed blacks and the race hustlers who profit from race. The average person used to give them the facts and they'll be like, you know what, I didn't know that. That's something to think about. But the extremely brainwashed blacks, you can give them all the, you know, those blacks, you can give them all the facts in the world, all the evidence, all the stats in the world, and they just can't accept anything but the race narrative. Where the tactic of absoluteness is one of those tactics that they'll fall back on. And again, it's not a black thing, it's a liberal thing. You know, you get the same thing from feminists about the issues of feminism. You bring facts and stats, and they want to fall back on absoluteness. So it's not just a black thing, it's a liberal tactic. You know, the way you deal with this tactic of absoluteness is pretty much the same way you deal with all liberal tactics. Is you just first and foremost you acknowledge and let them know that you hear it, that you recognize it's being used, and you don't allow it, and you keep hammering the facts. But most importantly, you again let them know, hey, I recognize this absoluteness. I didn't say all. If I say much more likely or at a higher rate, obviously that's not all, and you let them know, hey, I didn't say all. And again, you recognize it, let them know that you recognize it, and that you're not going to buy it, and you keep posting the facts. And that's how you deal with pretty much all liberal tactics. And there's going to be some difference here and there, but as far as the tactic of absoluteness, that's pretty much how you deal with it. And I'll be, you know, covering over more other tactics that you will commonly hear amongst liberals. And as always, y'all, until next time.